America worldwide.
I've had people walk out of me before, but not when I was being so charming.
Video streaming at housefarms.com.
I don't care for you or for the putrid sludge you're troweling out.
Damn puss-faced little pimp stick.
True progressive talk.
Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
Welcome back to the show. So Philip is still with us in Lviv. Johnny Million's looking at our chat right now, and he'll have questions for Philip from our chat room at infotainmentwars.com. That's the YouTube channel if you want to link in there. Now, one of the most amazing things, and you know, in saying you feel like Lafayette being around Philip during this and being on the ground there, which it's extraordinary, is seeing lately, especially, the footage of Zelensky going outside in the street and going to hospitals and that kind of stuff, while you know that there have been 3 specific hit squads out that failed, by the way, that they themselves were unable to get inside, and every day he's in mortal danger. There's no question that at any time they could, you know, do something really awful, and we wouldn't put any of that past Putin at this point. But that's another extraordinary point in this, is that you do have a proud leader who's doing this, and it almost seems like Putin is answering this by trying to put on a good show with his statements on the air, and then that rally. Did you watch that?
He's not good at it.
No.
He's not good at it.
No, he's not a charismatic leader.
Terrible at it.
So you saw the Putin, yay, we're bombing Ukraine rally, which, I mean, it looked like the Nazi Olympics. It looked like it was halfway between this, it's like, how do we do a big, genocidal rally that you could also have a soft drink sponsor? You know what I mean? Visually, that's what it looked like. And yet,
And it was filled with flaws and technical difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
And then also what was as bad as Putin's performance was, and he is really bad at that.
Mm-hmm.
He always has been. If you go past, there are certain situations where he's actually really good, and the camera loves him. When he is in a room with his cabinet and he's dressing them down,
Mm-hmm.
the Russian public eats that up. It's just red meat. Because there he is, he's cracking heads. But if he gives, I mean, my God, did you ever see him play I Found My Thrills on Blueberry Hills?
Oh, yeah, right. When he sings or tries to be personable. Yeah, he's not good at the baby kissing stuff.
Are you?
Right.
I mean, my God, man.
I got a few questions from the chat if anyone wants them.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, but let me finish. Johnny, let me just quickly finish my thought. There are also a number of speakers that led up to Putin, and that actually isn't very funny. It's scary because those guys were talking about stuff that was really like, we are on a God mission. We are a different, unique people, and we will fight against the lies of the West, and we are with God, and we will reconquer these worlds, these countries, and these lands where the Western corrupt, almost capitalist. It was almost like Soviet stuff,
right?
It was like where there's a ruling elite that dominates and blah 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 blah. Look, it's now getting into propaganda and a world think and a group think, and it's going to get to a point, I fear, where we're going to have to maybe consider that because of the brainwashing that's been going on in Russia, that as much as I hate to say it, that we are not just against Putin, we're against the Russian people, because the Russian people have been the victim of a brainwashing that gives support to Vladimir Putin.
Right, but that's at least a battle you fight.
Hopefully that fever breaks.
Right,
hopefully that fever breaks.
But and that is that's a different battle than you fight. System. Right, that's a different battle, and you fight that again with messaging and the like. I don't know if you saw Schwarzenegger's message this week, but it got passed. It was amazing, right. And there's no way that doesn't get through. No, so Johnny has some questions, and I want to get to those in a second.
I apologize that I don't have the people who asked them, but the first question I've got here is: will the Ukraine eventually surrender? is the enclaves.
It's not the Ukraine, it's Ukraine. The Ukraine is what Russians call it. Ukraine. Yes, okay.
Oh,
yeah.
Hey, by the way, before I answer that, because I have a very simple answer to that, is no. So actually, you know what? I answered the question. There it is. No, no frickin' way.
Yeah, they're not
this
surrender.
Country will never surrender.
Right.
Never.
Right.
I'm here now, and I'll tell you, they will never surrender. But secondly, when we talk about like these phonetic arguments of like, or these like language arguments of is it Ukraine or is it the Ukraine? You're absolutely right. It should be Ukraine. It is. It's
a country, not a territory.
Is Ukraine on the border? So it is a country. But secondly, I'm sick and tired of hearing everybody pander to the idea that you don't want to call this capital of this country Kiev.
Okay.
I agree. It should not be Kiev, but it is also not Kiev.
Okay. Cool.
Okay. It is, and unless
Kiev.
you are a Slavic language speaker, it's very subtle. But the difference is this: it's Kiev.
Kiev.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Because there are two different alphabets happening here. There's the Ukrainian alphabet and there's the Russian alphabet. And in the Russian alphabet, there is a word yeah. So they get upset when you say it from a transliteration from Russian to Kiev, as opposed to Kiev, which is what, because there's the replacement in the Ukrainian alphabet is a double I as opposed to the backwards R, which is ya in Russian. So class is done, students.
Right. Yes. Well, I would also.
Sorry.
I made this.
Sorry,
No.
You brought it up. You brought it up. The difference between the Ukraine and Ukraine. So I just had to make because every time I hear Western media going Kiev because they're overcompensating, it drives me freaking nuts.
Well, again, this is one of those situations where whether you call it Kiev or Kiev, people know what you're talking about, even there. And, they do the same thing with like Spanish pronunciation and names, but they don't do Italian for some reason, which is odd. So I don't know why you wouldn't go Mario Angelati when you're, pronouncing a Spanish name as if
Did my family come from Munich or did it come from München? I don't know.
Right, exactly. But they never do Chinese names, which actually change meaning based on the tones. You can actually change someone's name by how you say it. So they don't do it with the tonal languages.
Too.
Yeah, exactly. They only do it in style. So Johnny has some questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, I do. So another person asked, with the bomb so close to Poland, what could potentially happen there?
It's a good question, and I've had that question asked me in the last 36 hours because of what happened north of us. Right now, they're hitting what they aim at because they're using long-range weaponry, which has the danger of if you even change it by just a grade or two could mean miles and miles off. So you want to be very precise when you're using long-range weaponry, and even the Russians understand that. So they were launching stuff out of the Black Sea, whether or not it was a submarine or it was a surface vessel that shot off a cruise missile. They hit what they intended to hit, as is the same with the foreign training ground 30 miles west of us here. What was that? Of 4 or 5 days ago. Yakovlev, if I'm remembering correctly. So at this point, because they're using long-range weaponry, it is still pretty precise because of the great distance you want to hit what you're aiming at, and they have been. What concerns me is if they actually move military units closer to here, and you can use medium-range fire, and that, especially with Russian military doctrine, is basically you blanket a stretch of territory with munitions and just blow the crap
out of it.
Can I say crap?
Yeah. Yes, of course.
You blow the crap out of it. So look at what's happening in Mariupol. Look at what's happening in Kiev. Look what's happening in Kharkiv. this is Russian military doctrine. Blow the crap out of everything that you are close to. You get your infantry right up to the point where once you've destroyed the position that you're trying to destroy, you send in the cannon fodder, and your soldiers go in there because you got plenty of them, and they sweep the place. So
Right.
I fear that's what's going to happen in Kiev, but here in Lviv, probably not, because we'll see their actual troop movements getting much closer to you before they can use medium range weaponry.
Well, and also you have a different fight that goes on in a place where you want to keep most of the infrastructure than places you don't. So if you're fighting in Afghanistan, it's a zero-sum game as far as the Russian military was concerned. If they just destroyed every single building in the whole country, fine. They didn't care.
Yeah.
It's different in Ukraine because of not just the need for it later, but because of the messaging of it ultimately, that they do end up losing their own propaganda war if they level entire sections of apartment blocks and that kind of stuff.
They can destroy Kharkiv. They can destroy Kharkiv. They can destroy the suburban areas around Kiev. They can't destroy St. Sophia's Cathedral in Kiev, or they can't destroy the Opera House in Lviv without UNESCO and the entire world saying you're destroying world heritage.
Right, exactly. And the argument is you're destroying your own, right? That's the other thing, that they lose their own fight in this. And that is a difference between...
Which is why I feel relatively safe here. It's why I chose this location, because I wanted to have the dateline of being in Ukraine. And make no mistake about it, I mean, I'm at risk.
Yeah.
But I am nowhere near as at risk as my colleagues who are in eastern locations from me.
Right.
I'm not, that's not what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, James, for the super chat, by the way. He says we can rebuild Ukraine with all the frozen assets, Putin and his associates, including Chelsea FC.
Don't think the Ukrainians haven't said that to me.
Yeah, exactly. And there, he's got kind of borderline enough to do it. He's worth $200 million. You could freeze those assets and distribute them to, that's a lot of apartment blocks in an Eastern European country. I'm just saying, we got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. It's the House Sparks Radio program, mega worldwide. Let's not forget, on our way out in 1997, when Boris Yeltsin said, "We are coming close to creating a new and big Europe without dividing lines, a Europe where no country would dictate its will to others." That was after that whole stupid "you won't move an inch further" thing in Germany that was said in conversation. That was part of the written agreement. We'll be back. Over the, we were just talking with Philip during the break about, the sort of the purpose of being there and bearing witness to all this. And largely, I'm sure I'm not the only one who has questions, but I'm going to defer to our chat right now who has some questions. Johnny, what are the questions they have for Philip while he's there?
One thing, but before I rattle off another question, I did have a general one. Would you be willing, Phil, to answer questions like this on Twitter?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, if you guys want to,
right, so if you don't,
I'm here for one reason only, and that's to get the word out.
Yeah. So I'm going to change your name on there,
change
Philip.
his name to
this is to your Twitter handle is now up underneath you.
So here's another one, and this one
I'll do the best I can. I'll do the best I can. I'm second guessing myself. I'll do the best I can.
Of course,
yes,
right.
Do you know, Phil, how many Russian generals have died in Ukraine, and who is killing them?
I've heard as high as 6. And but I think also it plays back to this idea that the Russian military does not like to foster independently capable officers. They don't have an NCO class, and they don't like it when their generals get too capable, because then they pose a political threat. I mean, you look at the general who oh darn it, the head of the Russian military during the Second World War, who of course riding on the horse outside of Red Square. Come on, Phil. Anyhow, they get too big for their britches.
Right.
and they Zhukov. Oh boy, that was terrible.
Okay.
Nicely done.
They get too big for their britches, and the political powers get nervous, and so they don't like to see an officer class that gets too ahead of itself.
Mhm.
So it's been really interesting during this war, because I've also been talking to a dear friend of mine that I've known for many, many years, and he was actually a soldier in the Soviet Union. He was a
Mhm.
conscript in the Soviet Union, and then eventually, when the transition happened to the Russian Federation, he stayed within the military as a conscript. And then
Right.
when he left, he went down and fought in Nagorno-Karabakh.
Mhm.
He was a journalist, a war correspondent in Nagorno-Karabakh, and he told me, when we were talking earlier this week, he said, look, this has been a real serious problem in Russian military doctrine. They don't like to have a functioning officer class, nor do they want an NCO class.
It's competition.
Then, yeah, exactly. So what they love to have is a whole bunch of conscripts and a
Right.
bunch of generals who are little more than apparatchiks and who are technically good at what they do, but they don't want them to be really good in performance, because then the spotlight will be on them and the political leadership will feel threatened from them. So you don't
Right.
want a star. So and what is amazing is that we have been training the Ukrainians for the last 8 years, and we have completely restructured their military.
Yes.
So they do have a really strong non-commissioned officer class, and that's why these people are kicking the
Yeah.
out of the Russians, because they're all independent soldiers with a command structure that allows for small unit activity.
Right.
And that is not what the Russians do. And so
No.
you can have a small unit of 16 men who have in-laws or javelins or whatever, and
Yeah.
they can do serious damage to these Russians who are just massive because of their structure. And
Mhm.
the Russian military doctrine has been completely revealed to be not effective in 21st century warfare.
It is the modern equivalent of the redcoat strategy in the American Revolutionary War, facing what would be the Kentucky Bluegrass Militia. I was a kid.
Oh my God! How?
Yeah.
Come on!
Right. When I was 7 years old, I marched in in this Kentucky parade that we have in Frankfurt every year, and our group took part in a reenactment of the Battle of Richmond, which was won by the Kentucky militia coming in at the last moment and fighting from the trees against the overwhelming size of the military there, with guys carrying in stacks of muzzleloaders and firing one after the other as a kid reloaded right next to him, with a 9-year-old child loading guns next to their dad laying on a hill, firing 6 guns in a row, because that's how slow the guns operated back then. And that was the deciding factor in the Battle of Richmond. And this is very similar to that regard, in that these giant convoys are coming in. And one of the people that you're talking about, this is General Andrei Mordachev, died in Ukraine. He's the most recent one that they've at least listed. And he was
He's a paratrooper.
Yeah, huge decorated dude, older guy. But I also believe, and there's every reason to think this is how it's working out, is that Putin, in regard to this kind of ego and not wanting competition, if there's any of these generals that he's got any worries about, he's pushing them to the front of the line. He's, this Hitler did this, Napoleon did this, Stalin did this, Mao did this to some degree. That you have somebody that's edging for your job, and you just put them in a very dangerous position, and that seems
Maybe. I'll interject in there, in that the sense that you're giving Putin more responsibility of the structure of the Russian military than I think he deserves. I think Putin has been sold a Potemkin village by the Russian military for the last decade at least, if not longer. I look back on all of these videos that I used to monitor when I was working for broadcast for Sky News or for CBS or whatever. Part of my job was to monitor these video feeds that would come in from various countries around the world, and they would give them to the Associated Press, APTN, or Reuters, and they would feed that out in a bulk feed. And you would occasionally see these things that Putin would go to where he would test the latest Kalashnikov, or he would get a display of the effectiveness of their new Armada tank, which was so technologically advanced that it could beat any Western tank.
Right.
But the problem was that you had a very small, and these now in retrospect, looking at those video reports, I don't think it was as much a propaganda thing by the Russians as it was the fact that the president was being taken to these places and being told, this is what all our money that you have allocated to rebuild the Russian military is doing. But when in reality, it was rotting on the vine because everybody was lining their pockets.
Right.
Corruption is endemic in Russia. And so the military that Vladimir Putin thought he was coming to Ukraine with is not the real Russian military. It was the Potemkin village that the Russian military industrial complex and the officer class was selling him.
Right. Well, that's also the case that maybe Putin isn't pushing those people to the front because he doesn't want the competition, but also his generals do the exact same thing, that this is a cultural thing amongst them, that like somebody might take my job and I've got the ear of the dude, and if somebody else tells him where I'm screwing up, I'm going to broom that guy to the front. And so as much as Putin might, I don't doubt that there's a couple of people like, you get to go fight. In a couple of moments. In the case of these other sub-generals, I don't doubt they're sending their colonel generals to the front for that very reason. So
it's a dog-eat-dog world.
It is, and again that goes to, and we got a break coming up in just about a minute, but that goes to, again, that conversation about inalienable rights that you fight for versus you only get what you take. And, that is more than any difference. And yes, it is in direction, but it is also, there is an alliance in achievement that you have to secure those rights. The government is for the purpose of securing those rights. That's what democracy is all about, is that we believe you have these rights, and therefore our government, the only real purpose of it is to make sure you retain as many of them as you possibly can, without someone taking them away from you or you taking them away from someone within the country.
How do you transfer something that is inalienable to actually written law?
Yes. Yeah, it's a huge, extraordinary step. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this with more Philip.
Project.
And your questions. Follow Philip Ittner, 1L, 2 T's on Twitter. That'll help you out. And you can ask him some questions there as well. And then, of course, Johnny will have some as soon as we come back. Welcome back to the show. So, one of the biggest conversation points about this, Philip, since you're there, is about the messaging. And I have a question about that once we answer a couple of other questions. So we've got some people in the chat who've had some questions that they want answered to, or try to get an answer on. What do we have next, Johnny?
Yeah, so I'll throw this one out there again. Does anybody in Ukraine care anything about what Marjorie Taylor Greene says?
No.
And next, right.
Yeah. Does Phil think that the Arnold video will make any difference to the Russians? I haven't seen the
actually, I do. I mean, look, I'm a Californian. I have a love-hate relationship with Arnold.
Right.
But he is revered in Russia. And he was very smart to make the point of, look, I had a hero when I was a kid, and my father was broken at the siege of Leningrad. I mean, he hit on so many themes that speak so deeply to the Russians. It's why on my social media, I keep putting out the painting by the Russian artist who I can't recall right now, but it is the famous painting of the death of Ivan the Terrible's son, because his son came to him and told him a cold hard truth, and it is that basically a military campaign wasn't going well, and in his madness, Ivan the Terrible, Ivan Grozny, Ivan Chetvyrty killed that which he proposed to, what he proclaimed to love. And I think that's what's happening with Russia right now. We need to touch upon these things in Russian culture that they will understand. And much of that is their own nationalism. So if you go to them and say, I really revered this weightlifter and he changed my life, and I think that the spirit of this guy is not what Putin is telling you, that's a way that maybe actually a message can get through.
Right. He gave me this coffee cup. Okay,
go ahead.
As a matter of fact, he gave me this coffee cup to drink my coffee out of every morning ever since, and he's been the big hero of mine. This is, he literally held up.
My father was broken after the
siege of Leningrad, this type of thing and this type of nature.
But he's right. He's right. A lot of those Nazi soldiers live with that for the rest of their lives, and a lot of these Russian soldiers are going to live with this for the rest of their lives.
Right.
Johnny, go ahead.
Go ahead.
One person asked, how many troops from other Russian-friendly countries are actually coming over? Is Phil hearing of any?
Yeah, they're the Serb. There are the Serb units. There are Chechens. And there's all sorts. There's a world within the Russian sphere of influence that believes the messaging that's coming out of Moscow, and they're willing to fight against the big, corrupt, evil West. So it's happening, sure. But the response the Ukrainians have, especially like the Syrians that have said that they're going to come here, they're like, okay, come on over. There's plenty of ground here that needs sowing with your blood.
Right.
It's terrible, but it's true.
Well, I mean, at a certain point, how much death do you want to watch before at some point you just go where your language catches up to the experience you're having? I mean, that's just a reality.
The Ukrainians themselves are like, we are spilling so much of our own blood in sacrifice to actually have an identity and a future that we can determine. That if you want to run your people into the grindhouse that is this country, we are putting our own people willingly into that grindhouse. If you want to send others in, we're willing. And the thing is, there's such overwhelming support within the populace itself that, I mean, it's terrible. It's awful. I see a sense of bravery in that, and I see a sense of like esprit de corps. But at the end of the day, it still means a lot of people are going to come here and die, and a lot of people are here dying. And it's just at the end of the day, they can't win. They can't. The Russians, Putin, cannot win here. It's not going to happen. It's just not. So the time has come for Ukraine to be a nation, and they're not going to bow down from it. And as terrible as it is, there is also a sense of like, come and have a go. All right, you'll send as many as you want.
Yeah. By the way, somebody in the chat said Ilya Ripin, I believe, is the artist you're talking about, possibly.
The painting. The painting.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a beautiful painting.
Right. So, and do you have another question, Johnny?
Do you think that Putin really believed that this would be an easy victory?
Yes, I do think he believed it was going to be an easy victory, because I think he's been lied to by his own military command. He thought he had a world-class military. He does not. And he also really did legitimately, he is so self-deluded, thinking that the Ukrainians are just a sub-tribe of Slavs who have been kind of perverted by a Germanic fascist, Western American, what have you, capitalist, corporate, power structure. That he can't fathom the idea that a people would actually stand up on their own. It's beyond his capability of understanding. He expressed that in Maidan. He is expressing that now. He thought that once he was the one pushing the narrative, that the narrative would be adopted without resistance. And frankly, that's delusional. It shows how out of touch he is, because these people have been saying for centuries, we want to be our own country. And they've been saying it loudly since the fall of the Soviet Union. He chose not to listen to that.
Right. I have, so let's see, we're pretty good on time on this.
One more.
Okay, yeah, one more question.
Yeah, please.
Yeah,
Please,
do the Russians have access to a free internet, like a real one?
In Ukraine?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
or in
sure.
Russia?
No, in Russia you don't. In Russia you do not. He has shut down every major international social media. There is a version of Facebook called The Contact, which is in Cyrillic. So it's structured differently because of the actual very fundamental difference of a language with a different alphabet.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny to note that Contact is basically just a Facebook clone. So there's an internal Russian internet. Nevertheless, there are another reason why Vladimir Putin is living in the 20th century, not the 21st, is he doesn't understand that his young people are way smarter than he is. And they have VPNs. They have VPNs and they have ways. Sure. They're online. They're seeing it. They're all seeing it. They're all able to see it if they want to. The problem is that they are so brainwashed that many of them, and I'm afraid to say it is a majority within Russia, would rather believe the lies that they know are lies than swallow the bitter pill that people are being slaughtered on their behalf and in their name.
Right. It's also
it's willful ignorance.
Right, and some people have a sort of an emotional and moral scotoma where they're like, I don't want to believe that something this awful is happening in my name, so they can dilute themselves about it. And no country is free of those kind of people, anyways, ever. That's understandable. The volume aspect is really due to the
we have them by space.
Yeah. But the curious thing is that we have sort of a weird flip-flop happening in the United States, that it's the right wing that's normally jingoistic, nationalistic, America, rah, 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 that is all of a sudden Putin, rah, 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 and we really just need to roll over and let him do this. I think part of it...
Why do you think all the God talk? Why do you think all the God talk during the spectacle?
Oh, yes, right. Yes, when beg your pardon, when Putin started...
Freudian slip.
Yeah, he actually made up his own Bible quote. He says, it says in the great book, the Bible, that many Christian believers believe in, which is one of those things where... he's the pretense that anybody's allowed to believe whatever they want, that kind of idea. Is that where he's trying to throw that? But he was basically saying that
and also the fact that you've got the main press secretary for the foreign ministry coming out and making his speech about how we as a people and as a state believe in tradition and believe and know that we are with God.
Right. Yes. And he said our fighters are operating in that great, line from the Bible that a man will truly lay down, a good friend will lay down his soul for his fellow man or whatever, which is just made up battle bullshit.
And Putin in his speech from yesterday, when he told people he was going to spit them out, the betrayers who were more interested in their
like insects,
foie gras, their oysters, and also threw in for good measure,
gender,
that there is, the gender conversation. He knows who he's talking to, and he has fellow travelers in the United States that he knows he's talking to.
Oh yeah,
now,
Nick
I
Fuentes.
want to make one quick point, and then Johnny, if you have another question, let's go for it. But I want to make a quick point in this, and I made it in a vlog that I made earlier, and I'm going to try and get back to them. I took some time off to grieve for my friend, and I had to kind of do some mental health stuff. But I'm going to start vlogging again.
Good.
But I made the point that they don't actually believe this stuff. They're using it to attack us because they have one enemy in the world that they fixate on, and it's us. And they know that our own sense of self-analysis and our own awareness of our own faults is something that they can prey upon to divide us. And they use it as a weapon. They don't really care about this stuff because they don't do it internally within their own country. There is no rule of law. Racism is endemic, and they don't ever assess it. And they have a class system that is far worse than ours. It's feudalism, frankly. But they know that if they poke at us and wedge themselves into the issues that we ourselves are concerned about, that it will contribute to deteriorating our unity. And they use it as a weapon, and and they have been studying us for over a century. We are the focus of their entire intelligence. 95% of their intelligence is directed right at us as Americans, and they try and attack us in that way. They don't really care about it. When they do all this stuff, it's because it's for consumption, both domestically and to those who hear that message in the States.
Correct.
And our fellow travelers.
Yeah. And I would say that weaponizing our view of freedom and weaponizing the very rights that we take for granted in a lot of cases has to be the system they use, because it's the exact thing they're trying to quell in their own countries. And they can go, see, this is what happens when you have too much freedom. This is what happens when you have too much conversation, when you have too many differing points of view. It's exactly what the Chinese do. They talk about it exactly the same way. And this is how they squashed, by the way, the Ukrainian democracy you were talking about earlier that existed centuries ago. This is, just there's so much room for agent provocateurs and sabotage and tribalism being fomented artificially. And unfortunately for them, I think they were very surprised that all this work they've done in the modern era with social media and all this stuff, and it still didn't take off. It still didn't work like it was supposed to. It was supposed to all tee up, and Tucker Carlson was supposed to say this to his minions, and they were supposed to carry the message, and they were supposed to meet no resistance in these pathways that were set up. None of the dams, none of the bulwarks would work, and it would just flow through.
Well,
and magically...
As an unabashedly patriotic American, I will say that is because fundamentally we are actually a really good people.
Yes, we are. And ultimately, if people are given enough time to stretch their legs in their own freedom long enough, they get there too. And because human beings aren't that different, but cultures can define people for decades and hundreds of years on an interpersonal level. We got to take a break. We'll be back.
The reason we get upset at injustice is because we want justice.
Right.
In other countries, injustice is just a way of life.
That's right. That's absolutely right. It's within reach. It's like a girlfriend I had that was so gorgeous, and she spent so much time in front of the mirror because perfection was actually in reach.
Lucky.
Every little thing, but was something because she was so close to perfection, and I don't have to worry about that at all. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, mega worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Like and subscribe. Give a thumbs up. Infotainmentwars.com. And again, one of the reasons why I started doing Nerd Halen, for example, was because when Caleb, who's the guitar player, presented the idea to me, I was like, people need this kind of stuff. Outside the fight for democracy and all this other stuff, once you solve those things, what are you solving for? You're solving for joy and laughter and family and fun and gatherings and human beings getting along and all those things. So any art I can do that does that, I'm in. 100%, let's do it.
For the silly. I'm all for the silly.
That's right. And so that little song, the happy ending song we play.
I've seen enough. Let me take a second here, Hal, if you don't mind terribly. And I don't know what the framing is for my camera here, but this is my buddy.
Yes.
That I started talking about here.
Yes.
Pierre.
We can see him.
And
Yep.
one of the
Oh,
reasons
it
why
shut
I
off. Hold
love
on.
being in really bad
Hold on.
places
It
with
switched to a
Pierre.
picture. Hold on. It switched to a different picture. There you
Oh.
go. Back him up. There you go.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Where's
Nope.
Pierre? Where's Pierre?
You'll
Well,
find him.
anyhow, regardless,
Yes. We saw him in the beginning.
Yeah. The reason why Pierre and other buddies of mine that I've had in bad locations, some of them are so great to have with you, is because even
Mhm.
the darkest of hours, they bring you joy. And
Yes.
joy is not a small thing. A dear friend of mine pointed out to me a few years ago a quote by Stan Lee, the great late Stan Lee, who said, basically, I'm paraphrasing here, but it was basically the point of, everybody kind of poo-poos art and pop culture, but when you're in your darkest hour, the thing that actually reminds you that you're alive and that there is joy in being human and being alive is art. I mean, and we've seen it in this fight so far. We saw the young girl singing Let It Go in Russian. I mean, come on.
Yes.
We saw the band in Odessa in front of sandbags playing "Don't Worry, Be Happy." We saw. I've seen in this town, just go again to my vlogs, people, just an outpouring of artistry, because you're right. Once you get past the argument of what rights do you have, and where does politics and government interfere with, or where is that boundary between a collective and a governance and governments and your individuality and all these kind of things. At the end of the day, what you really want to be is happy.
Yes.
The pursuit of happiness.
Right.
So
the people playing piano when they're leaving their apartments, or the people, I just posted, there's a rabbi in Ukraine who was just singing, a song for Ukraine as he walked out of his, out of the temple that they had, for Purim. That ultimately, that is what life is all about. And a lot of the fighting that, we've experienced, resource wars over time are about, so you have enough food to eat and enough fuel for transportation so that you and your life can actually do those other things. That's the other thing people forget in the midst of this. But more than anything, in a fight about democracy, which is what this is, at its very root, that is, when that fight is behind you, that's where life can take meaning. And so these fights are for the absolute meaning of life. This is an argument between the Ukrainian view of what, and the democratic, and in many ways the Western view of what life is about, and the Russian autocratic, dictatorial, and to some degrees the Chinese or Iranian or Saudi.
And look, neither of us are saying, I think, Hal, if I can put words in your mouth, and disagree with me if you will, but Russians want to be joyful too. They're wonderful, beautiful people. I have very dear Russian friends. That is not to say that Russia doesn't have a culture of joy and beauty and
when they're allowed,
sweet, subtle, lovely, sublime things in life that make life worth living. But there is also there is a difference in that there is a belief in kind of a fatalism and power structure, and again,
which by the way comes from a lot of the geographic. There's the geographic nature of the country itself, what it actually can and does produce.
Well,
there's a lot of the cultural stuff that comes from that. But the point I want to make is that what this fight, and I hope people view this for what the fight that it actually is, which is an argument about whether or not you should be able to dictate the terms of your own joy. You should be able to dictate the terms of your own happiness.
Fundamentally.
Or force your version of joy and in a fundamental fight on someone else. And I mean, it is
and that's why I am so proud to be here. I am so lucky, and I am so people say, my God, you're in danger and all the rest of it. I am exactly where I'm supposed to be, and I don't doubt there is not an infinitesimal part of my heart or my soul or my brain that questions why I'm here.
Right.
This is where I'm supposed to be, and I am so lucky to be here because
Right.
these people are doing something that as an American, I know that's a bias, but and maybe I'm putting too much on my own self-identity as an American, but I believe it. I mean, these people are fighting for their future and a sense to determine their own future, and to me, that is a beautiful thing, and I'm proud to be here. And I think if anybody is listening to this and anybody is even on the edge of questioning whether or not who is in the right and who is in the wrong in this conflict, I urge them to just take a look at what we have spoken about.
Yes.
And just understand that these people here on this ground are actually fighting for the ability to determine their own future and to follow their own joy.
Yes.
And we as Americans who did the same thing and created our own country so that we as individuals could actually pursue our own joy should do everything in our power to support these people. And that's why I'm here. And that's why I'm reaching out to every one of your listeners and every one of your audience members to urge them to put aside any partisan politics or anything that you may hear from the Russians with their disinformation campaign and their argument that there is no right to the pursuit of happiness. That if you disagree with that, stand now, because this is the moment, and it is an inflection point. And if we let this country go under the thumb of Moscow again, then all of us suffer.
Agreed. That's the end of the show. Thank you so much for being with us, Philip. I really appreciate it, brother. It means a lot. Johnny Million, thank you for shepherding us through all these questions.
Absolutely.
Thanks for everybody who had a question, and we will see you, Chicago, on the other side. Thanks, Chicago. Absolutely.
So my cat puked in the middle of all of that, so I got kind of distracted.
That's perfect.